effective because they wouldn't affect your product. The me generation, all kinds of bad things. Their mama was the me generation, their parents got divorced, all kinds of bad stuff. But the fact is they were just smaller. And they were followed by persons born, if you count them by 20 years, 85 to 05, Gen Y. Well, at first, Americans were so silly, they cut it off at 2000. So they counted generations at 20 years, but they wanted to say millennials. But that's 15 years, so it's obviously smaller. Well, that's kind of dumb. But so it turns out that Gen Y, if you count them as a 20-year generation, persons born 85 to 05, how many? Guess what? 78 million. Same size as the boomers. So all the big companies started to do polls, because that's what companies do. They see what's the demographic tick. Is organic in? Is natural in? Is gluten-free in? What are folks looking at? Is asthma on an uptick? So we got to get panels that don't get warped. It's pretty important. We got to get shades that are zero VOC, right? Got to look at what Americans are thinking about. And if there's 78 million of these folks, we better talk to them with their message. But it gets more interesting. It turns out that boomers married Xers, right? So a lot of old folks, old blokes, married younger women. It turns out that in 2010, there was the highest birth rate in American cities in about July through September 2010. And that was the end of what they say was Gen Y, meaning Generation Y is more like a generation at the turn of the last century, where you have Civil War survivors. Women were like, everybody was dead. So women would get a second marriage, and then they had a lot of extra babies. And so you had a 25-year generation. That is what Gen Y is. So what does that mean? That means we count Generation Y, a lot of demographers count Generation Y in America as persons born from 85 to 2010. Why does this matter to you? Here's why. If you count them as persons born 85 to 2010, guess how big? The answer is 100 million. They make even the baby boomers look small. That's a big deal. That means a lot, because these Americans are going to buy things. And yeah, Chinese are pretty important too, because there's a billion of them. But Americans are still a phenomenal consumer that drive even the Chinese, right? Because we've got to think about what are the Americans buying. And if there's 100 million of them, we better speak the way they speak. So there's a president in America. He hasn't been getting a lot of great love lately. But he won very handsomely. And he talked about change. And he preached a lot of good stuff. But how did he speak? He spoke to Generation Y. He spoke to them the way they talk. He spoke on Facebook. He Twittered them. He spoke to them digitally. They're a digitally connected organization of people. They're a digitally connected generation. In the globe, they're called Generation C, for the connected generation in this flat world. But we can't just talk to them digitally, and yes, your website and yours, Tony, for your product, and the right digital is the way to go. And we're going to talk to you about Amazon.com, a relationship that we have where we can get the spec on your product and you're done, you're on, you're digitally connected, and you go viral. That's a quick way to go from Australia to the world. And we're going to present that today. Maybe your coaching or your services at Bounce can be digitally integrated. Maybe they already are. But so that's something to think about. But what's the message? And here's the news. You do polling, right? And you ask seniors in high school in America, right, at the epicenter of this Generation Y I was just speaking about, these 100 million people. You ask them, what's your top 3 priorities? What are the top 3 things that matter to you? You know what these kids say? Do you think they say the war in Iraq or Afghanistan? Nope. Do you think they talk about the economy? No. No, your news talks about it, but they don't. The economy gets about 27% or less. Getting a job, 22% or less. But they don't want jobs? No. The only thing that's consistently 84 and higher % in the polls is the environment, caring about others, the air we breathe, the planet, and other people. So people, planet is as important as profit. And that's what we mean by corporate social responsibility. So we integrate that in your branding and in your presentation. And we do that in all the puzzle pieces that we try and put together for you. We try and do your planning, your value building, your sustainability strategy. If you need money, we'll help you raise it. We'll do a market analysis. We'll emphasize your digital collateral, and we'll execute, because if we don't give you an attainable thing, please don't spend time with us. Don't hire us. We've got to give you something you can touch, feel, make happen. And we put it together with strategic business advice, but everybody does that. KPMG does that. You don't really need that. You need it if it matches that filter of attainable, measurable, sustainable. We give you local expertise. I can't tell you how many Australians I meet, and we were talking about it with Tony as a joke. You go to the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show or whatever expo, but then you bring in your wife, and then you bring in your daughter, and then $25,000 later you had a lovely trip in America. But where's the local legs on the ground? Then you're going to next year you're going to hire your regional sales channel, and if you have your regional salesperson, that might be nice in the Midwest, except what about the Northeast? And then if you have 3 of them, Northeast, Midwest, and West Coast, that's great, but now it turns out you need a national director because he's somebody who's got to get after those 3. And it's enormous in scale for an Australian to undertake. So I would recommend to those of you looking at the American market, take your wife on a vacation and have a lovely time. But don't interact with this unless you got a game plan as to how you're going to do it. And so we meet some of these challenges. By the way, for full disclosure, I'm going to run through a lot of these PowerPoint slides. I may not stay on them. If something interests you, raise your hand. We're all friends. I kind of have a sense of who you are in the audience, so we can stop and we can be more interactive. Another point is that I'm going to be focusing on food really soon. And only some of you are food companies, but that's what we were prepared to do, natural products. And I'll use that as illustrations for some of the things that you're also thinking about in the supply chain. So so we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the natural and specialty food market in the U.S. And I see some of you obviously have products for that. And again, it speaks to those values. It shouldn't surprise you that organic and specialty products are the ones with an uptick because that Gen Y influence is so strong. But it also helps you to emphasize your value proposition. And it doesn't matter that you're not a food company, because as we just spoke to with Tony, your product's got to meet the mindset of sustainability. He's got waterproof panels. And so in a poor neighborhood, when they don't fall apart, that keeps spurs out of the air, which fights asthma, which is one of the biggest problems in American cities. And in sustainable design, everybody wants to build green. And so he's got a product that meets those values, just like organic and natural in the food world meet those value propositions. And so it's all about quality, innovation, and style in the natural and specialty food products business, and it is for many of your products that are not food. We, of course, give you an overview of the market. It's good to talk about internet, and internet may also work at retailers and may support retailers, but what about pure internet? So if you look at this slide, you see natural product retailers is one thing, and mainstream channels is another, and multi-level marketers is a whole other, MLM. But then there's internet, straight